Hockey fans, gather around, we need to have a little talk. There's been a lot of talk about tanking in the hockey world, mostly because there's a lot of talk about tanking going on in Toronto. You know, that whole center of the universe thing, I'm not really doing much to help that, am I? But in general, let's have a talk about tanking, because there has been some debate. Some fans are actually quite excited about tanking, and they think it's great. Other fans think it is a disgrace, it's embarrassing, and it's terrible to watch. Here's the thing, you're both right. Except tanking is always the better idea. Literally always. If you are a team that basically has no shot at making the playoffs, there is literally no better option than tanking. Zero, none. Now let's go through this step by step. First and foremost, when it comes to the NHL entry draft, why do the bad teams pick before the good ones? There's gotta be a reason. You know what? I have a theory. I think the bad teams pick before the good teams in the draft in the hopes that one day the bad teams will be good teams. It really is that simple, guys. That's why the NHL does it. That's why every league and sports with a draft does it. If you do poorly, you get to pick first because you stink. And hopefully you get a really good player or really good players that will help you one day not stink. Look at it this way. The best players in the draft are usually at the front. And you might say, oh, well, what about the Pavel Datsyuks and Henrik Zetterbergs of the world? The reason we talk about where those guys were drafted is because it's weird. Players that good are not supposed to go in the 6th or 7th round. And players like that do happen. But the odds of you getting the best players in the draft are in the 1st round or in the top 10 of the 1st round. Why wouldn't you want your odds of getting a better player to be as good as they could possibly be? That has nothing to do with math. That's just common sense. And then there was probably the most popular argument, which is, well, it doesn't always work. You're absolutely 100% correct. Put some food for thought. Look at most teams that ended up picking top 5, 10 in the draft for, let's say, 3 or 4 years straight that aren't really any good. Now, really look at those teams, though, and go, why aren't they any good? Let me just say it. The Oilers! Why aren't the Oilers any good? Well, wait a sec, though. Look at who their best players are. All 3 of the Oilers' top 3 scorers right now are first-round picks. Jordan Eberle, Ryan Nugent-Hopkins, Taylor Hall. 2 of them are first overall picks! So how can tanking be an example of the Oilers being bad if they got their best players from tanking? The Oilers' rebuild sucked around the tanking. There are extremes. Brian Burke kind of made the term Pittsburgh model famous when he was in Toronto. Now, the Pittsburgh Penguins are a pretty extreme example. People forget that the Pittsburgh Penguins were so bad in the mid-2000s that they picked top 2 in the NHL entry draft for 4 straight drafts. And the result was Marc-Andre Fleury, Evgeny Malkin, Sidney Crosby, and Jordan Staal. Extreme example, kind of unfair, that pretty much never happens. But when you want to talk about tanking working, why not look at the Chicago Blackhawks? They got Jonathan Toews 3rd overall in 2006, and then they managed to get Patrick Kane 1st overall in 2007. Remember when the Tampa Bay Lightning sucked? Because the Tampa Bay Lightning used to suck. Stamkos 1st overall in 2008, Hedman 2nd overall in 2009. Wait a second, hey look, they're good. John Tavares is a cornerstone for the New York Islanders. Imagine what Nathan McKinnon's gonna be one day. Here's one that never gets talked about. Ovechkin 1st overall in 2004, followed by Nicholas Backstrom in 2006. Wow. Now you might be shaking your head, yelling at the screen, because most of those teams have had their ups and downs. And most of the teams I just mentioned are not great because of tanking exclusively. The Islanders stunk for a really long time, and it wasn't until they made a few just really clever moves that they got to where they are right now. You know, the Boychuk trade, the Leddy trade, they bring in Halak. The Blackhawks draft Toews and Kane in the top 3, but they also get guys like Brendan Saad in the 2nd round and Andrew Shaw in the 5th. Tampa Bay gets guys like Tyler Johnson, Andre Palat, Nikita Kucherov. The examples go on and on. So there's much more to it than tanking. But if it's very obvious you're not going to make the playoffs, you're bottom 5, 6 in the league, and you got guys in your team you don't really want back, they don't really want to come back, expendable pieces you don't see as part of the future, why wouldn't you try to sell them for picks? You get people saying, well, you can tank, but what if it doesn't work? All you're saying there is, well, you could tank, but what if management's stupid? Fair point, but if you give management a top 3 pick, you are giving them the best odds at not being stupid. I get it, not every top 3 pick is a gimme, but if you do your job properly, it should be. So I'm not saying management should be happy when their team is bottom 5 in the league. I'm not saying that players should go out and try to lose every game, and I'm not saying players like losing every game. But I am saying if you're smart, tanking should work. What do you think?